Welcome back to Digitopia, where electricity meets data. My name is Bruce Douglas, Business and Communications Director at Eurelectric. First, I'd like to thank our supporters, Microsoft, Accenture, and Enlit, the whole Eurelectric team for setting up the event, members of the Beyond Digital platform for their input to the AI insights, the team here at Town Hall Studio, and finally, Fred, our cartoonist, who will be designing as we discuss. You'll see that later. In this session, we'll be talking about corporate sourcing of renewable electricity and the move towards 24/7 supply-demand matching. But first, some housekeeping. We'd like you to ask some questions to the speakers, and we'd also like to ask you some questions during an interactive polling. To do that, you'll need to access menti.com. Either click on the link on just below your live stream. Don't scroll too far yet. Scan the QR code you can see on the screen behind me, or open menti.com in your browser and enter the code you see 2825099. Please do that now, because we're going to come to a first polling in a second. Also follow us on social media at Eurelectric and use the hashtags Digitopia and It's Electric. So, this session. Corporate sourcing of renewable energy will play a key role in meeting decarbonization targets. During this panel, we'll explore how data and digitalization can facilitate renewable energy sourcing and move towards 24/7 carbon-free power. We have a great lineup of speakers today from suppliers, buyers, tech giants, and startups. So we have Helga Franz, who's the Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs, EU for Vattenfall. We have Vanessa Miller-Fels, Director of Energy Innovation and Impact at Microsoft. Brian Denver, European Energy Market Lead at Google. Olivia Corradi, Founder and CEO of Tomorrow. And Toby Forenzi, Founder of EnergyTage. So, to the first poll question. If you look on menti.com, you should find the question, where do you see the main opportunities for AI and other digital technologies in the power sector? Please put your answers in there. You can take as many of those as you want. Obviously not all of them. Predictive maintenance and asset management, unmanned remote operation inspection, weather predictions and forecasting, demand response, flexibility services, congestion management, energy trading, and customer service. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that. As you can see on screen, already quite a few of you are voting, and it's populating the bubbles. Whilst you're doing that, I actually read a recent Capgemini study this morning surveying 800 sustainability and tech executives from across 400 organizations, and it found 48% are already using AI for climate action. On average, they've reduced emissions by 12%, improved power efficiency by 10%, and reduced their waste by 11% since 2007. So I can see the results coming in, and it looks like you're voting for predictive maintenance and asset management is the winner, but it's quite an even split between that, flexibility services, weather predictions forecasting, demand response, all popular. In fact, the only one who's quite low is congestion management. Maybe we can discuss that later, but interesting results, and thank you so much for voting. We've got a number of these polls during the session, and we're going to come back to that. But now, we have a very surprise guest who's joined us in the studio today, and I welcome Guy Brindley to join me here on stage. Thank you so much for Guy for dropping in. Pleasure to have you here. Myself and Guy work together on the resource platform, and he, as you can see on the photo, he popped into my house last weekend. Guy, you're on a road trip around Europe, where you've done Belgium, Netherlands, visiting renewable energy plants. Yeah, please do tell us what you've learned, and I think hopefully this next slide will help you illustrate that.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Bruce. It's a pleasure to be here. As you said, I was fortunate enough to go out on the ground, see some projects, meet some very interesting people, yourself included, obviously. Obviously, these are difficult times, both socially and economically. But I think the thing to take away is renewables are still being built, they're still being planned, and importantly, they're still being financed. You can see this chart here shows the PPA volumes contracted per year in Europe. And to date, we have just overtaken the amount of volumes contracted in 2018. But perhaps this doesn't tell the full story, because in fact, if you were to look at the number of PPAs signed, they're almost double in 2020. So this shows the PPA market has momentum, and it's not going to be stopped by the pandemic.
Okay, good, great. Thanks for bringing positive news in these strange times. And if we look at the next slide, you can see this is the RE100 members. I believe it's over 260 companies. You know many of them very well, Guy. No doubt you've visited some of them. And they combined represent over 275 terawatt hours of electricity demand, which, if it was a country, that would be the 14th biggest demand country in the world, just behind Mexico, I believe. It's growing every day. Now onto how corporates can actually source the renewable energy. I believe you've got a slide here on business models.
Yeah, exactly. So there's many options that corporates can go for when procuring renewable electricity, and the model which is best for them really depends on that corporate's characteristics, their energy demand profile, risk tolerance, and so on and so forth. And I'd encourage you to visit our website, resource website, where we have a lot of additional information on this, and of course our upcoming event on the 7th of December too.
Sure, absolutely. No, it's super valuable information on that website. And so, listen, thanks for coming. I know we've got to be brief, a lot to get through to today. But listen, have a safe trip. And as we explained, you popped into my house last weekend. You charged with solar power from my roof. Hope as a wind guy, you know, that's not too painful, but driving a Tesla with solar power in it.
It's okay. I'll get by, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot, Bruce.
Cheers. Thanks, Guy. Take care. Okay, so now, what are we going to discuss in this session? It's really about the future of corporate sourcing. We're going to discuss the next level and moving towards 24/7 renewable energy by increasing the granularity of supply-demand matching. Together with Resource, we're going to set up a task force on this next year to explore the opportunities and challenges and facilitate this movement. What are the potential benefits of moving towards 24/7? Well, increased credibility of corporate sustainability claims by increasing transparency and trust. Second is to drive further carbon emission reductions and accurate carbon accounting. And finally, facilitate new business models and technologies, such as storage, flexibility, but many others. So excited to get into it. We're going to have our first case study now. This project from Vattenfall and Microsoft provides customers a new level of transparency into the electricity consumption, and delighted to have Vanessa Miller-Fells from Microsoft to explain what they requested and the end result. Please, Vanessa, could you turn your camera on, unmute yourself, and hopefully we'll have you on screen.
I'm right here. I don't know if you can see me already. Hi, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
Okay, I'm struggling to hear you, but I can just about hear you. So please, Vanessa, we've got some slides. No, sorry, we haven't got your slides. You're going to just speak to camera. There we go. Thank you. We see you on the screen now. Perfect. Could you just explain to us the project and walk us through what you requested? Thanks, Vanessa.
Sure. Thank you, Bruce, for having me. And as I said, thanks are particularly in order today, as it's Thanksgiving here in the US. So I really want to thank Eurelectric, Vattenfall, EnergyTage, and Google. We're working with all of these parties really on this thought leadership and how we built this digitopia, as you just mentioned. So before I jump into this 24/7 solutions that we piloted with Vattenfall last year and that we announced 2 days ago that we will be deploying at our Microsoft data centers in Sweden, I'd like to kind of take us a bit through the Microsoft journey, because I think for most companies that are setting goals to procure renewable energy, it is a journey, and it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. And I think it's particularly relevant when we think about the 24/7. So early in January, Microsoft has set an ambitious goal to be carbon negative by 2030, which means we plan to remove more carbon emissions from the atmosphere than we emit on an annual basis. And obviously, to contribute to this ambitious goal, how we power our data centers and our facility is key. And we've pledged to have all of our facilities powered with 100% direct renewable energy by 2025. But we've already been carbon neutral since 2012. And that's where I'm talking about a journey. There's definitely different flavors of how a company can claim to be 100% renewable energy. And that ties back to what you just talked about, Bruce. Like, what is the transparency? What are the tools that we can put in the hands of companies, but also of consumers to understand these different flavors, how they may be related to the limitation of the market? So, you've mentioned that corporate PPAs are critical in that decarbonization of global power system. I mean, they represented, I think, last year about 10% of the overall installed capacity of renewable energy globally, a bit less in Europe, a bit more in the US. And when we think about kind of why we decided to be 100% renewable energy, economics is obviously part of it. I mean, most companies have started looking at renewable energy because the cost of renewable energy has decreased so dramatically over the last 10 years. And because it has become so much more attractive to purchase renewable energy versus, energy that's on the grid or fossil fuel-based energy. But obviously, on a similar kind of footing, I think climate has become kind of quite center. And for Microsoft, really, the destination is not 100% renewable energy. What we want is 100% carbon-free grid. That's really what we're all after. And so I really like what you said when you framed kind of our conversation here. It's about carbon at the end of the day. And again, going back to this journey of corporates, we used to look at the impact we're having by looking at additionality. And I don't really want to get into the definition of that criteria because there's lots of literature around that. But another term that appeared more recently around corporate procurement is emissionality. And I kind of like that one. Again, maybe it's not, we shouldn't kind of get stopped by one word. But the question is, what is the carbon impact of the actions we're taking? And how can we kind of maximize the carbon reduction along that journey to 100% carbon-free grid or 100% renewable energy grid? What's the fastest route to get to that destination? And how can we create the tools that will reflect real-world carbon impact? Because when we say 100% renewable energy, does that mean 100% carbon zero? And that's really what's interesting was what we've developed with Vattenfall, and also what others like tomorrow will be speaking, and EnergyTage will be speaking, are developing. So as I said, 2 days ago, we announced a 24/7 solution with Vattenfall that will be used in the new Microsoft data centers in Sweden. And what we will do there is measure renewable energy consumption per hour. So Vattenfall will deliver environmental product declaration labeling hydro and wind power on a 24/7 basis to the 3 data centers that we have in Sweden. Vattenfall is using Microsoft Azure IoT to build and deliver that 24/7 matching solution that will allow hourly matching of renewable energy generation and match it to the demand of our data centers 24 hours a day, 360 days a year. And then in addition, we have access to kind of what's the carbon footprint, the carbon impact of our procurement. Looking ahead, we see a growing demand from customers to understand their carbon footprint. And we see an incredible opportunity to leverage and build the data and the digital tools that will inform in real time any electricity consumer of its energy and carbon footprint. I started by mentioning Microsoft carbon negative goal. And as part of our carbon negative goal, we include our scope 3. Scope 3 emissions covers the supply chain and the downstream carbon emissions, like the emissions resulting from the use of sold products. So the emissions for Microsoft, for example, it will be the emission resulting from the Xbox and the surfaces that are being plugged and are drawing power from the grid. And this is really something that we see a tremendous value if we can kind of get to that visibility of in real time, what's the carbon footprint of any device plugged anywhere in the world and how can we start changing behavior and start shifting to renewable energy where it has the most impact and where it reduces carbon the most. And I think because also it's Thanksgiving, I want to say that another focus for corporate procurement for us is going back to kind of what's the maximum impact we can have, is thinking about the communities we're in and thinking about the social impact we have when we develop projects. And so here also in that front, I see a lot of innovation where data and technology has a role to play. We've developed kind of 2 new business models, one in the US, one in Democratic Republic of Congo. And I think we shouldn't lose that social impact, particularly with the tiring times we've been living with COVID, and really kind of think about how can we maximize the impact and the benefits of the actions companies like Microsoft are taking. So I'm really excited about this conversation and how we think about this, how we maximize our impact. Thank you, Bruce.
That's great, Vanessa. And listen, thank you so much, especially on Thanksgiving. It always seems to be that we organize an event on Thanksgiving and ask you to join. You always do join, and that's fantastic. So really appreciate that. Also appreciate your leadership. I mean, part of the title of this session was leadership, both personally, you personally, but also Microsoft. And Microsoft has 2 roles, if you like, the tech giant, but also the buyer, and a very progressive buyer of that, of renewables. So really appreciate that. Also the
broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in
the carbon negative and social impact side is really taking it to the next level. And when you talk about Scope 3 emissions, that is an ambition that we look forward to challenging with you. Also emissionality, I love that word. We're going to dig into that later, no doubt. But quick question to you, and please keep the answers short, but specifically, how can we account for and incentivize hourly matching of renewable energy? And it's more the incentivize. How do we get other companies to join? And a brief answer, please, Vanessa.
Yeah, sure. And I'll be brief. I think data is key. I mean, the data transparency, the data tools, and the simplicity of what we're building will be key. So this is really what we're working on with EnergyTags, and tomorrow is data first, policy, and then kind of pilot and scalable solutions. I think these are kind of the 3 pillars I was thinking ahead.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Vanessa. Okay, thank you. We'll come back to a panel discussion with you in a moment. But first, we're going to move to Helga Franz from Vattenfall. Helga, could you please switch on your camera and unmute yourself?
Absolutely.
Hello.
Hopefully that works.
Yeah, it does indeed. Great. Nice to have you here. Thank you so much for joining. And if you could present to us from your side, I mean, how you delivered what Microsoft requested, and the broader Vattenfall strategy on 24/7. Thanks, Helga.
Happy to. I think the best thing that we realized when we started talking with Microsoft about the product is the fact that the climate ambition doesn't present itself as a top-down policy measure that's being implemented. We see this ambition throughout the chain, and that's really coming from the customer, in this case our customer Microsoft, but also from their customers, this real ambition to do something about the climate crisis. And that's something that of course fits for us very well, because we as a company, Vattenfall, has the ambition to become fossil free within 1 generation, but we also aim to power climate smarter living, and that's really focused on our customers. And that's also really why the product fits very well with what we're aiming to do. When we spoke with Microsoft, it was very clear that the Swedish situation was perfectly fit to start a project with this, a pilot with this project. Apologies. Because it really allows us to utilize the large amount of renewables that is available in the Swedish energy mix, and work on a data-driven solution to actually make that visible, how we supply wind or hydropower to Microsoft. And that's something that that really fitted very well with Microsoft, and that's why we're very happy to have done this pilot and now expanding it in 2021 to Microsoft's data centers in Sweden. I think one additional element that I want to share, because of course the data use and the transparency of what's happening in the system is really important for us already now to learn how much flexibility needs to come from renewable energy for the future, where this renewable share in the energy mix is going to be much, much bigger. But of course, it's also really important to highlight the policy side of things, because fitting this product together with a guarantees of origin mechanism that really pins down, what is produced and what is consumed is really important. So I think that fits very well with the situation we're in now. We're looking at lots of Green Deal policy measures being updated. And I think this is a really, really excellent opportunity for the guarantees of origin mechanism to be harmonized much more than it is right now, to make it robust, allowing us and our customers to continue to work on pilots and projects like the 24/7 matching solution.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Helga. And really, you captured it there about future-proofing. So whatever we design now, be it policies, technology, business models, have to be ready for the huge renewable energy share that's coming. And of course, policy frameworks are key in general for all that. So a quick question back to you, and please keep the answer short. But now on the topic of the event on digitalization and AI, I mean, how do you believe data and digitalization can support your investments in fossil-free production assets? So on the generation side, how do you see that?
I think it's in a pilot, it's a good exercise. But of course, we have a good share of renewables in the system, and we have the pilot with Microsoft, making it relatively easy to do this matching and to practice the setup of this product. Once there will be more and more customers on products like these, that's where the digital side of it becomes even more important, where we will have to use data in an intelligent way to predict available wind energy, enabling us to do this near real-time matching with the demand of the consumers. So we will need this digital aspect from our perspective as Vattenfall, but we also need the customer, of course, to get this intelligence about their own energy consumption and how that matches with the situation around them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks, Helga. We're going to come back to you in the panel discussion in a moment. But first, we're going to move on to the second case study, which is Google and tomorrow. Both have been mentioned a couple of times already in this session. So Google's ambition is by 2030 to run on carbon-free energy everywhere at all times. Hugely ambitious. Brian, if you're there, could you turn your camera on, unmute yourself, and tell us how you're going to do it?
Hi, good afternoon, Brussels. Hi, Bruce. Can you hear me okay?
We can indeed, Brian. Welcome.
Great. Thanks, Bruce. And yes, as you said, in September, Google CEO Sundar Pichai announced that we were setting ourselves this ambitious new goal for 24/7 carbon-free energy sourcing. That is that by 2030, we aim to match our own electricity demand in every hour with carbon-free energy from the same regional grid. And Anna, if you could just put up my first slide. You'll see on this slide with the image in the center that Google already achieves a 100% annual renewable energy match. And this means that over the course of a year, we source an equivalent amount of gigawatt hours of renewable energy worldwide through our power purchase agreements and energy supply contracts to match our annual electricity demand. And so with this new 24/7 carbon-free energy commitment, we're taking a big step up and expanding this from matching on a global and annual basis right down to a regional and hourly basis so that Google can operate its data center fleet and offices in a way that is genuinely carbon-free. We've set this goal because we believe that we can have a much greater impact on decarbonizing power systems if we use our demand to help develop carbon-free resources when they're needed most and where they're needed most. And I think, as we've already heard from Vanessa and Helga, that 24/7 goals bring with them a lot more data and complexity in order to help Google and other consumers who are interested in these initiatives to expand their renewable energy portfolios, schedule resources, and track and certify progress towards these targets. And transparency is really important. So we need to leverage more and better data, as well as new digital technologies to manage it. And we want to make sure that these resources are available to other corporate consumers who want to use them and want to set new goals. So I'm going to speak briefly about just one of the technologies that Google is deploying at our data centers to support our 24/7 carbon-free energy goal. And if you'll just see on the next slide, this is a visualization of this technology. It's something we call carbon intelligent load shifting. This is a first of its kind platform that we've developed at Google and have been piloting across our global data center fleet. It's a tool which allows us to shift flexible compute tasks at our data centers during the course of the day to optimize for times when wind and solar resources are generating the most. So we can do this because there's a portion of compute jobs at Google's data centers that are what we call non-urgent. They have some flexibility in when they're executed. So for example, processing videos on YouTube or even training models for self-driving cars. And what we find is that we can shift some of those compute jobs and therefore shift our electricity demand to times of the day when the grids are cleanest. We can do this without actually impacting the performance of the services to our users. And this obviously wouldn't be possible without a lot of data and intelligent forecasting capability. To do this, we rely on two sets of forecasts. One is demand on the demand side, so Google's own internal forecasts of our own hourly power demands. And one is for supply. So we rely on day ahead forecasts of the hourly carbon intensity of the grid. And for that, we rely on the great work of the team at Tomorrow. And I think Olivier is going to speak right after me about their work and take the credit for enabling this platform, or take some of the credit. And the next step then that we're working towards with this platform is moving to not only shifting these compute jobs in time, but also in space, moving compute tasks from one data center location to another to further optimize for carbon-free energy. And it's just one final slide to wrap up. This is what we call a carbon heat map. It's a visual representation of the content of the electricity supplied to an individual data center in the 8,760 hours of the year. And Google's goal is to fill in the gray and white patches, which represent use of fossil resources, with dark green, completely dark green, to reach completely carbon-free supply. And by operating 24/7 carbon-free, the data centers and data infrastructure needed to coordinate and optimize Europe's future power systems can actually contribute to the decarbonization of that system themselves, whilst also hosting all of the data and delivering the computational power that's needed. And so I'll wrap up with that, and thanks for your attention, and back to you, Bruce.
Thanks a lot, Brian. And indeed, you should take some credit for that, your leadership and progressive. But Google also is a buyer, a tech giant, but also working on demand-side management. So, fitting into a lot of roles there. Just a quick question to you, and again, keep the answers short, but tracking and certifying the 24/7 goal is clearly data-intensive. Where are your data needs? Where are the gaps? How are you going to enable this going forward?
Yeah, so I guess there are several different categories of data. One is for measuring and tracking progress, and we mentioned how important transparency is. Another is for forecasting and planning, being able to forecast 5-10 years out what the future grid mixes will look like in order to inform our own renewable energy purchasing. And then we also need data for managing and optimizing our resources like this carbon intelligent compute. I think in terms of gaps, Europe is somewhere where increasingly consumers can access most of the data that's needed. And I think TSOs and ENSOE have done a fantastic job at compiling a lot of the grid data, for instance. And there's been good progress in giving consumers access to their own energy data and improving interoperability. But because many corporates who are thinking about 24/7 matching have global footprints, I think we need to see the same sort of data governance elsewhere in the world. And what Google wants to do is support making this data and the tools and protocols that are needed to shepherd it together much more widely available and accessible to other consumers at a global level.
Okay, thanks, Brian. And a small fact is taken from the AI Insights, which you'll find on the website you're on now. If you do scroll down, there's all the the report, the analysis, the case studies. Also, one fact I picked out on data, by 2025, the global data volume is likely to reach 175 zettabytes. That's a lot of data, which is a 500% increase on 2018 figures. So there's a lot of data out there, and we're going to come on in a minute to how we can use that data in an intelligent way. So thanks, Brian. We'll see you in a moment for the panel discussion, but on to the next case study with Olivier Carradi, the founder and CEO of Tomorrow. He's going to present on 24/7 carbon accounting. Olivier, could you turn your camera on and unmute yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I hope you can hear me well.
Indeed, Olivier. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Anne, if you could bring my slides up, that'd be amazing. And we can immediately switch to the second slide to set the scene a little bit. I'd like to talk about why this is so important and why we are all gathered here. Because what we're witnessing right now is probably the most profound transformation in history that is happening. And the reason is that 90% of all of our energy usage is currently fossil fuel based. So of course, a key solution is to electrify everything that we do. And in that challenge, we need to figure out when to use electricity when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining in order to maximize our usage of carbon-free electricity. And as you'll see in the next slide, we built at Tomorrow the electricity map system, which is a system that gathers data from across the world. We gather data from TSOs, and we have to give credit to Ensui as well in Europe, who's done a fantastic job, as Brian mentioned just before, in gathering all of this data and curating it as well. And we use all of this data in order to assess and compute in real time the origin of electricity, the physical origin of electricity, and its associated carbon footprint, which in the end allows us to do 24/7 accounting. But what is fascinating to me is that we can also do forecasts 24 hours ahead, and then make sure that any system in the world that uses a significant amount of electricity uses it at times where the electricity is decarbonized. And we have the example with data centers and the collaboration we're doing with Google. But we also have other examples that we're working on, such as electric vehicles, for example. That's as well a huge opportunity for making sure that we reduce the carbon emissions from mobility and that aspect. Now, it has been mentioned already previously that transparency is a key aspect to enable trust in the computations that are made. And this is why the project is partially open sourced, in order to make sure that we can provide as much transparency as possible, but as well that we can rely on a community of experts around the world, which give us the knowledge necessary in order to make the best calculation possible. Something that we also are utilizing data for is the so-called marginal emissions. And without getting too technical, this is where we use the biggest and most complicated AI systems. And what we're basically doing is trying to assess what is the impact of changing our behavior as a grid consumer, or the impact, for example, of installing more renewable capacity. And that is the question that artificial intelligence can answer. And finally, if we move to the last slide of my presentation, what we really want to strive for tomorrow is to democratize climate action. And if we want to democratize climate action, we also need to make sure that 24/7 accounting is available to everyone. And so we are working on tools that enable to connect to, for example, smart meters to automatically gather information about when is a company utilizing electricity, automating the carbon footprint process, and then focusing on the actionability side of things in order to make sure that we as a society move as fast as possible towards a fully decarbonized electricity grid. And we can only get there if we also get the consumers and the prosumers on board. And so that product is called Bloom, and you can check it out on bloomclimate.com if you're interested. So thank you very much for having me here, and looking forward to the panel discussion right after.
Yeah, pleasure, Olivier. Just before you go, I've got one quick question for you. Well, firstly, it's great to see a company like yours developing the tools that the power sector can use. You know, the data, digitalization, the AI, but the question is about data. You alluded to it, about trust. I mean, how can we ensure that the data can be trusted, and how can we ensure that it drives the green energy transition? Just a few words on that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be brief and be very happy to elaborate a little bit in the panel discussion. So if we think about it, a number is really just a representation of the physical world. And I think if we want to drive trust and make sure that it has a real impact, I think we need to follow physics. I think in the end, we need to have numbers, calculations that represent reality, the physical reality of the system. And this is where our strategy has been never to reinvent the wheel and do things ourselves, but really to collaborate with experts on the topic. And this is why I'm so excited that we're working with big names on these topics, why we're also open sourced, and why our collaboration with, for example, NCOE is so important. So I think the trust part really comes from being able to utilize data that is curated by other actors and working together on establishing standards and methodologies that are open.
Great. Thanks, Olivier. And we'll come back to you in the panel discussion. You said thank you so much. We're moving on to our third case study now, and this is from Toby Ferenczi, who's the founder of EnergyTage. Toby, please do turn your camera on and unmute yourself. And Toby's going to tell us about EnergyTage and what it does to facilitate the move towards 24/7 renewable energy. Toby, welcome.
Hi, Bruce. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, if we could just move to the first slide. So I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about the EnergyTage initiative, which is a new initiative that started to increase accessibility for consumers to 24/7 energy sourcing, increase liquidity, and to incentivize, actually create a financial incentive for 24/7 matching of energy. We've heard a lot about the benefits, why this is important to the system, but what EnergyTage is, we're an independent, non-profit, industry-led initiative to define a standard and build a market around hourly electricity certificates. And there's several benefits to this, several reasons why you would do this. Firstly, I should point out, I'm sure most people are aware that the current renewable energy certificate schemes, so predominantly guarantees of origin in Europe, but also RECs in the United States and similar schemes elsewhere today, use a monthly timestamp for the certificates and have a 12-month window in which those certificates can be claimed or cancelled. And what we're talking about is how can we move to a more granular, temporally granular system of electricity certificates. So the benefits, why you would want to do this, firstly, we think it will help build trust by directly linking production and consumption in real time. Second benefit that we see is we can use these certificates to create an incentive, not just for building more renewable energy, but actually to create an incentive for building flexibility, things like batteries and storage and demand response, because those things are needed if you want to do 24/7 energy. And by having a system of certificates that can be sold, stored, and traded on the market, we can actually create a financial incentive for these things, as well as just more renewable energy. And the third benefit that we see is, as Olivier pointed out, if you account for your energy consumption and carbon on a more granular time frame, you can be much more accurate. And so the plan is to incorporate carbon data. It could well be from tomorrow. You could actually provide a means to understand what are your carbon emissions from your energy consumption in real time, and also what are the what's the carbon abatement of your energy consumption, and in a way that is recognized by the market. So you can create value, and we can create links to carbon markets and other schemes. And the fourth benefit is we see a lot of new ways, new markets evolving
We just need to
around
move the slides
local
forward.
flexibility markets.
One more.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, that's it.
I
Sorry,
think
we've got it now.
if we could keep moving the
Yeah,
things, like local flexibility markets. But really, the key message, if you could just go forward one more, is that we're trying to create widen access to hourly to 24/7 tracking by creating a common tradable instrument that can provide transparency across power markets, flexibility markets, and carbon markets.
Yeah, I think we need to go forward one more slide. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
Thanks.
if we could just go forward. Sorry, it's difficult. If we could actually just go forward and just reveal all of the bullet points on the next slide. I'll just say a few words on the what is the initiative, how is it structured.
We seem to be having a technical problem. We'll just be back with you in 1 minute, as soon as we can get the GoToWebinar platform working again. Okay, it seems that we lost Toby there for a second. So we will move on. We're going to come back to a panel discussion with the speakers in a moment when we get them back online. This is the digital world. As I said at the beginning, somewhere between dystopia and utopia, and we're somewhere in the middle. In the meantime, we do have a second poll question for you, and that should be on your screen in a moment. Please go to menti.com to see that. And the question is, which do you think are the biggest barriers to increased renewable energy sourcing by corporates? And this is not the data or digital barriers, it's the generic barriers to increased renewable energy sourcing by corporates. You have multiple answers there. Again, you can take as many as you want. So first one, lack of supply of renewable projects. The second, lack of demand from energy buyers. The third, credit worthiness of interested buyers. And fourthly, complexity. Fifth, lack of awareness and information. Sixth, policy and regulation. And seventh, lack of a level playing field, economic competitiveness. So those are 7. Please do start answering now. I can see the results coming on the screen now. I mean, when I was at Resource Platform, we were discussing this a lot about what are the barriers we're trying to overcome. And we concluded that number 3, so creditworthiness of interested buyers, so especially small and medium-sized enterprises. Number 4, the complexity. I mean, a PPA is a significant contract, and you need a legal team to be able to complete that. The 5th, the lack of awareness, so people understanding what's possible. And then the 6th, the policy and regulation. So those are the 4 we picked out and really worked strongly on whilst we were there. You can also see all those and the solutions to those on the resource website. Is it possible to see the results on the screen? Yeah. Sorry. I have so many screens. Here we go. So which are the biggest? So, as I said, number 4, which is complexity, is really getting a lot of votes. And number 6 was the policy at 24%. So it's clear, again, that really the policy framework, both at a European level, a national level, and the local level, needs to be right to be able to unlock the potential of renewable energy sourcing. So we're going to see if we can get back to the speakers now. I'm just looking to our technical support. We need 2 minutes. Okay. What I propose we do, I know they're telling me they've got them up. Yeah, we're going to need another minute, so apologies for that. Whilst we're doing that, what I propose we do is go to the cartoonist if we can, to see what he's been drawing so far. Fred, thanks so much for taking the time out and drawing for us. You may have seen already one of his drawings on social media, the date, but let's see if we can get up a screen of the cartoon.